Hello, everybody. My name is Lafayette Harris, and I recently had the pleasure of going to see this wonderful movie called Chevalier. It's about Joseph Bologna, who became a famous black musician during the time of Mozart. The actor, as a matter of fact, was there and gave a wonderful interview afterwards. I hope you go see this movie. We loved it. Okay? I made some edits to his interview, added some more content and some pictures just to fill out the story. Okay, I hope you enjoy it. Give a thumbs up, like, and subscribe.
Hi everyone, let's give this amazing movie another round of applause. It's great to see a full house. My name is Thomas Lafley. I'm the chief film critic at The Wrap and a member of New York Film Critics Circle. Without further ado, let's invite our special guest onto the stage. Please welcome star of Chevalier, Kelvin Harrison Jr. I will start us off with a few questions, and then I will turn it over to you guys. I'm sure you have a few questions too. I'm disappointed I don't see your violin. I thought you would bring it.
I left it in Prague when we shot the movie.
So let's start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about how you first got involved with this project, and then how much did you know about Joseph Bologna prior to joining the cast?
Yes. Also, thank you guys for coming. That's really cool. That's really cool. I first heard about the story. I did a general with Searchlight Pictures, just trying to see. I love what they do, and I love all the movies they make. And I was like, okay, is there any movie for me? And they told me, they was like, yeah, we have this war movie about this violinist, Joseph Bologna. It's called Chevalier, but I don't really know. We'll see if you're right for it. And I was like, okay. And then like a year passed, and finally I get the script, and I read it, and I was like, wow, this was the first time I've ever heard of this guy. At first I thought it was a fictional story as well. And I read the script, and I was blown away by Stephanie Robinson's script. And from there I begged them if I could meet the director, and they said the director wasn't meeting anybody yet. So I was like, all right, who is the other lucky little kid that's gonna get this opportunity? And eventually I met Stephen. We had a great conversation, and I said, can I have the job? He said, can you audition for the job? And I said, right, I'm ahead of myself. And I did a couple tapes and a Zoom callback, and then I had the gig.
And once you had the gig, correct me if I'm wrong, this was not your first time picking up a violin. You actually played the violin for a while, but not for years, and it's not quite, musical instrument is not like riding a bike. You kind of have to regain those muscles. So tell us about that process, because you're incredible in the movie and you're doing your own playing. So how did you train to become this excellent?
Yes, it is definitely not like riding a bike, and honestly, I don't know if I can ride a bike. But I can play a violin, but I can't ride a bike. But I played when I was 7 years old. That was my first instrument I ever touched, and I loved the violin growing up. I was first chair in the youth orchestra, and I played for a couple years, and then Hurricane Katrina happened, and the program that I was a part of went away. So when I got back after Hurricane Katrina, I went to school with my dad, and he's a classical music teacher, and a jazz musician, and also a classical saxophonist, and he made me join the concert band because that's what he taught. So I ended up playing piano and trumpet most of my life. That was, I played in the church and blah, 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 blah. But this was the first time in like over, a decade that I ever touched a violin. And it was very intimidating, but when I got the gig, I called my dad and I said, hey, the director wants me to play the violin, because I did beg him for a stunt double. I was like, dude, let me do the acting. That's gonna be more than enough work for me. And he said, well, maybe I'll get a new actor then. And I said, all right, well, I understand. So we came up with a routine of 5 months, 7 days a week, 6 hours a day, and that's how we tackled it. And yeah. It was, yeah, wow.
I mean, I'm sure all that practice and kind of just getting reacquainted with the violin must have helped you to get into the headspace of this, musical genius. But what else, I'm wondering, you had to do to craft this character? Because as we learned throughout the movie and in the end credits, so much of what was about him was destroyed, and he's being rediscovered thankfully right now, but you still kind of had to make this performance, make this person your own. So what was that balance like, kind of sticking to reality and also embracing fiction?
Yes, it was really hard. I Googled him, and the first thing I got was a picture of him in the George Washington wig, and I was like, okay, that's a start. And then I didn't really get much other information other than he was referred to as Black Mozart, and I was like, okay, well, let me go old school. And I remember being in college, we would, in order to research people, we would use JSTOR. So I went to JSTOR, and I know, right? That's why college. Go to school, kids. And I basically found these scholarly written papers and journals, and basically I read the papers to make sure they were good, and then I looked at the citations, and that's where I would find the research materials. And one of the books that a lot of people use was this book called The Virtuoso of Sword and Bow by Gabriel Bernat. And, oh, hey, Kelvin. Or Chevalier. Yeah, that's how I use that. It kind of chronicles all classical music of that period and a lot of the characters surrounding Joseph's life. And you learn about the economics of the time and how trade worked and what were the laws and what were the restrictions and who was Gossec and some of these composers of the time, and La Guimard and her backstory, Marie Josephine and her backstory, the mother, the father. And when there's very little information about Joseph specifically, you kind of have to just insert him into how people responded to his behavior, or what they said about him, and take those little tidbits and then apply the restrictions and see, well, how would one react to that scenario? And that was the basis of it. I listened to a lot of the compositions, and you listen to the music, and I felt like it was a little bit of a Joseph's diary. And so that would give me a lot of insight into him. And then Prince. I used a lot of Prince. I was like, Joseph and I Stephen and I, Jesus. Stephen and I discussed, and we were like, well, who is the contemporary comp for Joseph? And Prince, the way we view Prince right now is the way they viewed Joseph at the time. So I was like, well, in order for audiences to really feel the energy of what a rock star violinist, a virtuoso, felt like, I just looked up a lot of YouTube videos of Prince talking.
I mean, I can certainly see that kind of swagger in the moves. Especially the opening sequence, which is, a brilliant opening sequence. I just love in musical biopics, there's always this one scene where everybody is doubting the talent, and then you just show up and prove them wrong. So can you tell us a little bit about shooting that scene? Because you're dueling with no pressure, Mozart. What was that like to, kind of be in that position, having to play that piece? That must have taken a lot of prep. Did you shoot it in the beginning, or?
Yeah. Also, in Joseph's head, Mozart didn't want that smoke. So I was not scared to do a Mozart, you know what I mean? But it started, that was the first piece I got from Michael Abels, which was like 6 minutes long, and I could not believe I asked him to cut it. Once again, I was not trying to work this hard. But, that was a big part of the process, was going piece by piece, learning the adagio, to the allegro, to the cadenzas. And it started, obviously you have to learn the piece, but then the actual performance element of it, there were so many variations. Stephen Stephen wanted me to be like on the ground, like, and I was like, I gotta play this song, brother. And it don't really work that way. So, we had to figure out a happy medium. And I work with Polly Bennett, who is an incredible movement coach who worked with Austin Butler and Elvis and Rami Malek and the Bohemian Rhapsody. And we helped find like a physical language for Joseph that felt period appropriate, but still gave us a hint into what the experience should be like for the audience. So I got Joe, who plays Mozart, and we got a little room, like a conference room at the Sheraton. And I said, as soon as you land, I need you in the rehearsals. And we sat and we like rehearsed all day, every day for like a week, after shooting. And then we shot that scene all day one day, the day we shot it, and it was like blood in the fingernails, kind of experience, but it was a lot of fun.
Incredible. You mentioned earlier when you Googled, the first thing came up with, his picture with a wig. And I always wonder about this, especially in period movies, which you've done a number of, between this and Cyrano and others. How does that, or does it help kind of inform your performance when you're in the period attire, maybe a little bit more restricted, and in the wig? What kind of thing does that for you? Maybe switch on something in your head to help you get into the character. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think when you put on the wig for the first time, it's a mind-blowing experience, because being a person of color, to actually put on that George Washington wig, as I like to call it, it kind of transforms you into feeling like you're a little bit more regal, and you're more sophisticated. And as time went on with the project, as beautiful as the clothes were, I started to recognize them. Yes, it was Joseph's superhero costume, it was his cloak, so that people wouldn't see his blackness, but also it was diminishing his identity and who he was, and making him feel more ashamed of where he came from. And so, you start to take that on as a performer as well, and you have to use it to guide you through the experience. But it's an interesting thing, and it definitely changes the way you walk, the way you talk. I wanted the 3-inch heels, and you know what I'm saying? And there was only one pair of shoes. It was a size too small. My little toes was, but it worked for the walk. And we had an etiquette coach too, and she's, you can't touch your face and anything, and like they didn't like when I crossed my arms and stuff like that. But all that stuff helps. The restrictions help find new ways to attack some of the intentions, and find new ways to physicalize Joseph hinting at certain elements of what he wants the audience to know, or how he bows to Marie Antoinette, or how he, twists his coat and flips his ponytail to let people know that, don't mess with me.
So please tell us a little bit about fencing, because violin isn't the only thing you have to practice for this movie. He's a man of many talents. And I don't know, I think you have a black belt in martial arts. Did that come in handy in a sort of way? So tell us about that part of the training.
Yeah, fencing was hard. I did a little bit of fencing when we were prepping for Cyrano, because Joe wanted to have a fight sequence, and then he took it away from me on the day, because I know, that's what I told him. I cried, actually. I cried. Anyway, with me and Joe, I still gotta talk to him about that one. But I did some training there, and then we brought it back up for this movie, and that process was really interesting. I did get my black belt when I was 12, so the footwork and the agility was not that hard to kind of maneuver, but it's still, you had to be really precise, because he was such an incredible, quick fencer, and when you're dealing with the swords, it's very specific, because you don't want to hurt nobody. So I would do set all day and shoot, and then I would go to fencing training for like an hour, and then I would do violin and repeat for the duration of the shoot until we did the sequence. But yeah, all that stuff was at the end, because at the beginning of the shoot, y'all, I fractured my collarbone, and everybody was stressed, and I was stressed because I was like, I'm gonna lose this check, and I was nervous, but I couldn't fence, I couldn't play violin for like 2 weeks. So in the beginning of the movie, and like some of the scenes, like the scene when Joseph loses his kid, I was picking up that big old boy, and I literally was so scared that I was gonna take myself out from the rest of the shoot. But yeah, it's a lot of work, a lot of stress.
Tell me a little bit about your collaboration with both the director Stephen Williams and also composer Michael Ayers, who's brilliant. That's a lot of Jordan Peele movies. I know that he used both his own music and the original compositions by Joseph Ballon Chevalier. How did that sort of help you, or did you get involved in that process as he was composing? How close did you stay, and how did kind of Stephen came into that picture?
Yeah.
In the musical discussions.
We talked about it a lot, and it was just we mostly I talked to Michael Abels a lot about what his intention was behind writing some of the compositions, and what he was pulling from Joseph's music, what story he was trying to tell with the arc of the music as well, and then we talked a lot about conducting and the intimacy behind it and the love story elements of it. But Michael Abels was so generous, and our Zooms were so special. But it's really hard. It's hard to articulate because it's it's a lot of I don't know. It's hard to articulate, but it was beautiful. Yeah.
And what do you think was the most memorable direction you got from Steven? Was there something kind of like a shorthand you developed over the course of the shoot?
I mean, listen, Steven's from Jamaica, so he used a lot of Bob Marley references. I had to be like, I think you're in the wrong movie, man, because I'm not playing Bob Marley. But, he was really funny. We had a little Bob Marley quote every day on the call sheet, but he would be like, it's like Bob, when he's doing such and so song in this concert, and da-da-da-da-da, he's like, think like that. So it was always kind of like it was a Bob, I was playing Prince and Bob Marley, actually.
I was thinking about the themes of this movie. Obviously it's a period piece, but I was mostly struck by how contemporary it feels as well, some of the themes that it depicts, and also this genius black artist having to prove himself, work maybe 10 times as hard as his competitors. And I was also thinking about Loose, your other movie that sort of depicts the similar themes. I'm wondering, how you were sort of keeping the contemporary elements of the story sort of maybe at the back of your head, and what kind of conversations did you have with both Steven and screenwriter Stephanie to make sure that these were also front and center in your performance and in the story?
A lot of it was already in the script. Stephanie wrote such a beautiful script, and you just kind of have to follow the guide in some ways. But I think the negotiation is a story about. I always looked at it was like Joseph grew up in Guadeloupe, and he was around his mother, and he saw this incredible violinist named Sebastian, and that's what showed him what his love for music was. It was the joy it brought to these people who didn't have much, but to sing and dance and celebrate their lives as black people and slaves in this moment. That was their freedom, right? And that's what brought him joy. When you get taken away from your home at 4 years old, in actuality, in our movie it's 7, and brought into a space where you don't speak the language, where you don't look like anyone else, when everyone's telling you who you need to be, all he's looking for is community again. And so the journey of it is similar to Loose in a lot of ways, when he leaves Eritrea and he's stepping into an environment that is not his own. He's forced to assimilate to survive. Joseph is like, I want community, but I don't really know how to articulate that. I mean, what we're watching is a kid who's like, and I say kid because he's like 25, and doing all of this stuff. And he's so young, and he doesn't have the language. He's cocky, and he got a lot of other words, but didn't have the language to necessarily communicate, I'm looking for home. And I don't have home here. Everything I do with Marie Antoinette and Josephine and La Guimard and the King is transactional. They only want me for my gift. So, and it's the same thing with Luce. He's like, you only want me because I'm smart. I'm an exceptional student. But why do I have to be the one? You know what I mean? Why does this have to be the way for me to be deemed successful or worthy enough for your attention and your love? So you just kind of explore that. I went to private school, and I was like one of 5, 6 black kids in the school, and I was there because I played piano, and I got put on all the arts programs. I did a lot of the orientations, I did the musicals. Nobody knows a single thing about me from that school, to be honest. And it takes a toll on you because you want to show up for them just so they can smile at you, so they can give you a hug, so something. And that's, I kind of, you use that, and I use it for Joseph a little bit, and that's how you kind of tap into the psychology of it. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff, but I guess, the process, it gets weird, I don't know.
Before we start taking questions from the audience, I want to ask whether there was one particular really surprising thing you found out about Chevalier, because you've done a lot of research about this as you spoke. What was the thing that most surprised you about him that you were not expecting to find out?
You know, it's interesting. I guess it's I don't know a lot about his life after the movie too much because obviously I focused on what we were shooting. But, you know, I did find out about him being the first, starting the first Black Regiment and then the Revolution, and that aspect of him to kind of leave it all and still find this resurgence of confidence and apply it to a place where he really found purpose and in giving back when he was giving so much of his time to being validated by people that didn't necessarily want him there or really wanted to see him. I found that just really bold and brave, and I'm curious about it. I wanted to dig more into it, and I honestly want them to make a sequel, to be honest.
I was just going to say, when I was reading the end cards when I first watched this movie, that's almost like a new movie. It's the whole movie in there.
Yeah, fine. I hope they let me horseback ride or something if they call me back. You know, but I feel like it'll be. That'll be a cool movie.
Well, you heard it here first. Chevalier 2.
Star Searchlight.
All right, let's take some questions, but maybe we can dim that light a little bit so I can see the hands that are going up, because right now it's too bright. I see a hand over there. Yes, you, second row. You're the only one I can see. Beyond you, I can't see.
I'll take it. Thank you for coming. The movie was great. What was the music like on the set? Because obviously, as an audience, we hear like a polished version. But what did you hear there?
Did everyone hear the question? The question about what the music was like on the set. We hear a polished version, but what was it like on the set?
Well, everyone in the orchestra were real musicians, so everything was like live. I mean, basically you hear click, 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 click to keep in time because there was a session that we did prior to see what the music was in the movie and how long it should be. Sometimes even the acting scenes when there's music, we would have a click to make sure it was fitting in the time code that they needed. But we just kind of just heard a metronome, and you stayed on track with the metronome.
Let's take a couple more. Over there. Yes, you.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh, sweet.
Woo.
I'm gonna try to talk louder. That was amazing. Great movie. I think what I'm wondering, so after Joseph accepts his blackness finally, we see him switch from the wig to cornrows and when you're playing your concert, what was that like emotionally for you? Because it was interesting, I think, to see him accept his mother and kind of forgive her in a way, and bring her back into his life. But what was that like leading up to that?
Question about Joseph's character transitioning, accepting his blackness more and changing his hair, and then what was that like for you, that transition emotionally while you were shooting?
Yeah, it was hard. I think, you know, doing movies like this is tough because you have to stifle so much, and once you finally get to that moment, you're really emotional because you finally feel like you can relax. And you know, I got told a lot. Stephen was like, "You're so stiff," and then eventually we realized it's like, well, Joseph is stiff because Joseph is not being honest. He's scared to be honest because what are the repercussions of being honest? And yeah, he's making these bold moves by like taking passes at Marie Josephine, knowing that Montalembert is knocking on his door, being like, "I'm gonna take you out, brother." But at the same time, he's very smart and he's very strategic, and there's no peace when you're constantly being aware and looking over your shoulder every step of the way. There's no peace when you constantly feel like you have to fight your way through every single moment. So for me, performing it and for Joseph, I think it was like, you could breathe. In some ways, like after the baby's gone, Joseph can finally let it go. That's the last element of like me trying to like hold on to this past that I worked so hard to be accepted by, and they don't want me. So now I can kind of just say, I'm gonna do me, and I'm you know, I think the cornrows in so many ways symbolize, you know, historically they used to use cornrows to find escape routes out of the plantation, and that's Nanaw's way of being like, here's your escape out of this society. You are free now. Go and be you. Do what's right. Find your home for your people. Play and just start a riot. But yeah, it's those were the only times I actually feel like I really wanted to cry. And it took a lot, and it's also so weird because I look at it now and I would think about my personal mom, and I don't know. And you just look and you just, I don't know, it makes me sad right now actually. But yeah.
Thank you. Great question. Steak. All right, front row over there.
Yes. So first of all, you look good on big screen and
Thank you.
Question about how Kelvin kind of gets back to your own self after a lot of these amazing emotionally demanding roles. What do you do to decompress?
Something I'm still working on, honestly. But we were really fortunate enough to have a drama therapist on this movie. And basically, it sounds really weird and actory a little bit, but she would be on set when we had big scenes, and basically we could talk through them. We can talk through the trauma of the character, we can talk through our personal things that we're using if we need to as an actor. And that would kind of bring us back so that once the scene was done, we were done. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure was understood on this particular set was that we needed to have joy. And we needed to appreciate the fact that it's a privilege to be able to retell the story and not actually live the story. So after every scene, we would laugh, we would make jokes. I love applesauce, so we ate a lot of applesauce. I'm a toddler, but those are the things we went to operas. We ate a lot of food. There were a lot of dance parties. We listened to a lot of Afrobeat. We went to the trailer. We laughed. We ribbed each other. Apparently, I need to wear more lotion. So moisturizing was part of my routine. But there were a lot of beautiful moments, and I think as long as you know how to separate the two, you can maintain a sense of sanity. But after the fact, you gotta go on vacation.
I think we probably have time for one last question, so let's make the great one. Over there.
This is a more lighthearted question. Do you think you'll continue to play violin?
I was wondering about that, thank you. Do you think you will continue playing the violin?
I'm gonna pick it up eventually. I think the thing is it was so traumatic sometimes. It was because it's such a stressful thing. Because every day you're like, I was so nervous that I wasn't gonna be able to get. Because how we did the violin stuff too is, we would take it half speed. Because my dad, he's a classical music teacher, so he was like, we would take if the thing was 120 beats per measure, then I would start at 60, and then I would build my way up every single time. But it was always a race. You were so scared that you weren't gonna get it in tempo. And if you didn't get in tempo, then you kind of you won't be able to do it right, and then everyone's gonna be mad at you and disappointed. So I was really anxious most of the movie, and I did not sleep ever during this time. So I think I left it alone. I was like, I need to depart myself from Joseph, and then I started my next job. And when you start your next job, you gotta focus on. I just finished playing Martin Luther King Jr. for 6 months.
Can't wait to see
so
that.
I was like, I need to go and give Martin the respect he deserves, and I'm gonna come back to Joseph on my own time.
Well, if Chevalier 2 happens, you're gonna have to pick up the violin. Before I thank our guests, I will just request that please remain in your seats because he has a next engagement that he has to run to until we exit. Thank you. And Kelvin, thank you so much for this great conversation.
Thank you guys
Thank
so much
you,
for coming. I appreciate y'all.